Thank you, Stan. Polls have consistently shown that climate change and the environment is the biggest issue facing voters here in the Brisbane electorate. A few days ago, the coalition candidate for Flynn called the commitment to net zero by 2050 a flexible plan. While Matt Canavan said, it is all over bar the shouting. Meanwhile, the party's inner city candidates continue to spruik their climate credentials. With their internal climate wars not over, how can we trust the coalition to ever take the climate change seriously?
Stuart Robert.
You can't. You can't.
Look, thanks for your question. The government's position on net zero by 2050 is absolutely clear.
That's not what Matt Canavan thought.
Well, it is. Just because 1 out of 100 in a party room has a view,
I think it's more
when
than
the
one.
Liberal government, Liberal National government, the Liberal parties come to that agreement, the National Party has come to that agreement, the leadership and the government has come to this position, and the government has come forward to the Australian people to say, this is our position. It's quite clear, and if one person has another view, well, that's fine, but the government's position is rock solid and crystal clear. And the Prime Minister's made this clear. Indeed, the candidate for Flynn has also made the point he was talking about lead up to and not making a comment upon the actual net zero by 2050. But we cannot be clearer than this. The government is absolutely committed. We're one of few countries on earth that have brought forward a sensible plan driven by technology, not taxes, to actually get there. And of course, we've updated our projections on emissions reduction to 30 to 35% by 2030. And we're one of only a few countries on earth to actually have achieved our Kyoto 1 targets of 439 million tonnes over our Kyoto targets. Now, they are statements of fact, not in contention.
But when Matt Canavan says that, isn't there a case here that you're saying one thing to one constituency and another to another,
like the
and
Labor
it
Party.
goes to the credibility issues, doesn't
Like
it?
the Labor Party with the coal miners.
Matt Canavan doesn't speak for the government. The Prime Minister does.
Stan, the Labor Party have tied themselves in knots about how they address this with coal miners, people in the Hunter and in central Queensland. By the way, I'm 100% with Canavan, and I also agree with Colin Boyce. And net zero, after what's happened in the Ukraine, in terms of Western Europe, is now dead.
Can I go
the grown-ups in Western Europe know that it's energy security. That's the
Campbell,
issue
you and
now.
I are at odds because the government, the Morrison government, cannot be clearer on our commitment to net zero by 2050.
Well, Barnaby Joyce
cannot
tells
be
people
clearer
different things
on our
behind closed
technology
doors.
plan. And Barnaby Joyce, as the Deputy Prime Minister, has also been clear and unanimous on his support with the government as a core member of the government that net zero by 2050
That's not what a
is
gentleman
our
told me he said in Emerald recently at dinner.
The direction we're going.
Let me bring
is locked in.
Anika in on this. Is there not a case though when you look to what's happening in Europe, you look at Boris Johnson putting their targets on hold, you look at the energy crisis facing potentially in Europe because of Russia turning off the pipes. Does this also not lead to countries like China or India who have already pushed their target dates down the line, perhaps even revising those again? Is the world not changing right now because of what we're seeing geopolitically that may affect targets like 2050?
No. And the job of good leaders is to write the story of the future that includes everybody. People like Daniel, who's a flood victim, resources workers, like who Colin's trying to represent up in Flynn. And the reason that this is a tricky issue, but it shouldn't be, is that we just have to get to our decarbonised future as quickly as possible. And there's no pathway to net zero or a decarbonised future, whatever the targets are, whatever the time, without doing more mining, which requires strong mining companies. But we have to mine different things. We have to mine copper and lithium to get our electric vehicles, millions of them that we're going to need. We're going to need to mine other things to get our solar, our met coal probably, to get solar and wind up and running. And we need to do that because it looks after resources workers and it helps our flood victims because it comes down to decent, hardworking manufacturing workers in electorate like mine who then build this technology that allows us to have our renewable future and allows us to sell and build wealth for our country overseas. That is the job of good leaders, to write a story that includes everybody, and that is why you have to vote for a party of government.